we are starting Neuro, aka the coolest system in all of medicine and the most unknown. First, I want to start off by kind of explaining my rationale for including this slide. I want to start using my platform of education to actually teach you about real life things. It's something I'm passionate about, and I believe the American education system is terrible. So the best way to change it is to start doing it yourself. So what I'm going to talk about is mutual fund investments and Roth IRAs, and hopefully some of you already know about this, but it is literally magic, guys. Like, the best time to start investing is yesterday. That's a test question. No, I'm just kidding, but it'll be a bonus question just to see if you watch my beautiful lectures. So the first thing that's pretty cool is called the Rule of 72. And this basically is just calculation 72 divided by the rate of return, which, let's say, to make it easy, is 10%. And the average for diversified mutual funds is around 9 to 10%, so that's pretty realistic. And that will equal the time for your investment to double. So for instance, about 4 years ago, I started with $3,000. I'm getting about 10% interest return, so that means in 7.2 years, that 3,000 will turn into 6,000. Literally like magic. You're losing money if you don't invest in a Roth IRA, and if you don't do it young. As you can see, the difference here, investing $35 a week for 20, 30, or 40 years, the difference is astronomical. I mean, we're talking about 1.5 million by the time you're pulling your money out, versus 150,000 best case scenario, and that's only a 20-year difference. So let's say this would be like waiting until you're a doctor versus starting now. Start now. 1 in 3 people age 65 and older have no unearned income in savings and investments. That is crazy. And 65, that's when you're eligible to pull out your Roth IRA without a penalty. And another statistic, 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. That's also crazy. That's why everyone's freaking out about the government shutdowns, because all these government workers are living paycheck to paycheck. Nobody tells you that most workers get paid after the fact anyway when the government reopens, and not only that, they get paid for not working. So in reality, they're getting a pretty good deal. So don't believe everything you hear on the news. Roth IRAs, why are they so good? You're investing with money you've already paid taxes on, and then what happens is you build up compound interest, you get return on your investment, and then when you withdraw, it's tax-free. So the investment accumulates tax-free, and you get to withdraw it tax-free. It sounds too good to be true, but it's not. It's awesome. If you're interested, 3 great companies are Vanguard, Primerica, and Fidelity. And these are all great companies just like for the average American. A lot of mutual fund companies and hedge funds, brokerages will only take money if your minimum investment's like $200,000 or something crazy like that. And then some companies will only invest corporations investments. But these 3 companies are really great for the average American. Vanguard, the only downside is the minimum to start might be like $2,000. Primerica is great because you can start for just $25 a month and automatically goes into your retirement account investment. And then Fidelity is another great company as well. And all 3 of these companies have been rated very high by like the companies that analyze mutual funds, consistent returns. They're very, very reliable companies. I'm actually a representative for Primerica, so I'm really interested in this stuff. If you're interested in why diversified mutual funds are so great, long story short, they protect against stock market crashes by having, most have like 40% bonds and 60% stocks. And bonds is just when you buy the company's debt, basically. So these diversified mutual funds are really, really low risk, and they're protected against stock market volatility. And that's why they're so great. And it's basically free money. So start a Roth IRA. That's your assignment. Now getting into the neuro stuff. Terminology is always good to be familiar with. You'll see these terms over and over again. These four sort of go together, but afferent fibers, anything going from the periphery to the CNS. Sorry if you hear my dog whining. Efferent fibers, anything from the CNS to the periphery. Ascending, pretty self-explanatory, up towards the brain. Descending, going away. Ipsilateral, same side. Contralateral, opposite side. Okay, so next is the concept of, hey, stop it. Stop it. Next is the concept of ordered neurons. And whenever you see this, just think there's a synapse in between. So, but the first order neuron, its axons synapse on a second order neuron. Those axons go out, synapse on a third order neuron, and then those axons go out and synapse a fourth order neuron. If you want to relate it back to our autonomics lecture, do you remember the two neuron system? Number one, number two, synapse in the middle. So technically, this could be considered the first order neuron, and this could be considered the second order neuron. Okay, next I want to talk about sensory transduction and receptor potential. So transduction is basically converting an environmental stimulus to an electrical message. And this is very similar to the theme we keep seeing, right? There's like chemical to electrical conversion of the signal. And this stimulus isn't always a chemical, but a lot of times it is. For instance, capsaicin. But that's all transducing means. You're converting it from one form to the next. So when a specialized or a sensory receptor experiences this environmental stimulus, there's a change in the receptor membrane of that neuron. And that change is known as the receptor potential, aka generator potential. And all this is a change in the membrane that makes the action potential more likely or less likely to fire. This is an example of a really, really well-known membrane transducer called TRPV1. It responds to heat. So it's a thermoreceptor. It also responds to irritating chemicals and painful chemicals. Whoa, that was loud. Like capsaicin. So it's also a nociceptor, responsive to pain, response to acid, increase in ectomic pressure. But these are the two big things it's famous for, is responsive to heat and capsaicin. And when it's activated by these things outside the cell, it causes a change in the membrane or change in the receptor potential, so that allows for sodium and calcium influx and nerve cell stimulation. These are the types of receptors you'll run into. Mechanoreceptors are really common when, and we'll talk about this next, when we're talking about the PCML system for conveying sensory information. And the sensory information is vibration. Let's stick with vibration and pressure. So vibration and pressure information, for instance, in your skin, are transmitted in this this sensory system, and it has specialized mechanoreceptors. Some terms you'll see are like Pacinian corpuscles. What's another one? Meissner's corpuscles. And these are just named after just probably some egotistical scientists that wanted something named after them, which, I don't know, hopefully I can do that someday. I don't really blame them. Next is, the next classic example is hair cells. When we hear, they're transmitted by mechanoreceptors. And the last example is baroreceptors in the carotid sinus. And they respond to changes in pressure. So when there's a mechanical change, for instance, the walls of the blood vessel get distended, baroreceptors located at the carotid sinus sense that. They send a signal up to the brain to change stuff. And you'll learn all about that in cardio. Photoreceptors, pretty self-explanatory, right? Chemoreceptors are how we smell and taste. And also, there are chemoreceptors in the carotid body. So this is always something I got mixed up. Baroreceptors are in the carotid sinus. I don't know, that's BS. Think of something stupid to remember it. And then chemoreceptors are located in the carotid body. The thermoreceptors, that would be something like TRPV1 that we just saw. And there's also another, so these trips, there's tons of them. And they're famous for being responsive to different temperatures. So TRPV1 is activated by hot temperature, and then there's something called TRPM8, and that's active by cold temperature. Nociceptors, anything that is responsive to pain. This is what our lab focuses on. We focus a lot on primary sensory afferents that respond to noxious stimuli, so any painful stimulus. And TRPV1 is also an example of a nociceptor. Okay, question here to finish up. What kind of neurons carry signal toward the brain? So immediately you're thinking anything afferent, anything ascending, sensory neurons.